Yeah, yesterday we talked a lot about GDP, measuring GDP, and today we want to go further to, oops, where it is, here, to the general system in economics in developed countries, market-based economies of a system of aims which we have, and one of the main aims is of course steady and appropriate economic growth. And yeah, for this we need this number grow domestic product. And in order to just recapitulate what we have done the last times, let's talk about this. So we had GDP and we could calculate this from three different sides, and there we had the production, approach. This was, so to speak, looking at the economy from the supply side. What are we producing in the different sectors? Then we had the income approach. Uh, no, oops. And what was the third one? You can just look it up. Yep, expenditure approach, yes. And this expenditure approach would be then looking at the economy from the demand side. Well, and we looked within these three approaches on the main aggregates, production side. We had the services sector, we had industrial production and wholesale trade, construction, and I think that it was. And what was the proportions of these main aggregates? Well, we also looked at the agricultural, but I talked about this from a historical perspective. Right now, it's in developed countries, less than 2%. Services, this also we divided in two, and when we aggregated it to the whole one, this was the largest one together. Yeah, yeah, together it was roughly 50%. And then industrial production. Uh, could you please shut down your micro, because otherwise I will have a feedback on my headset. Thank you. Industrial production. Roughly. Did I 30? I thought I had 25 or 30. Okay. Well, wholesale trade. Oh, there I had then a 50. Yes, this was roughly 15%, and the last one with roughly 5%. Yeah, and actually we have to have a deeper look, especially in Germany, on this 30% industrial production, since there we see the change, especially for us in Germany in the automobile sector. Yeah, then demand side expenditure approach. There we had private consumption, we had government consumption, we had investment, and we had the trade balance. Exports minus imports, and they are the proportions. Yep. Mm-hmm. Investment also 20, and then 5% is left. So these are, so to speak, the main numbers you should keep in mind. And the last one, the income approach, there we had just the division of the income for labor and capital. Well, this was then quite easy that we had here the labor share of roughly 70%, and there we saw that over time it was quite volatile due to the development at the capital market, especially at the stock markets. So here plus minus 5 percentage points. And the last thing you should keep in mind, if we give here proportions, then we also have to know relative to which aggregate, and these aggregates are differing here, and this was relative to grow value added. From grow value added, then we got the GDP by adding taxes minus subsidies, and in the income approach it was relative to national income, and there it was a little bit more complicated that we had at first calculate the subsidies, and then we had to add the depreciation, and then we ended up at the at the at the grow national product, and then taking the income from people abroad minus the people from abroad working in our country, we came to grow domestic product. And here it was calculated relative to GDP. Yeah, and now we want to have a deeper look inside what is economic growth. Of course, we use this GDP, but then we have to admit that this is calculated with market prices, and so the GDP is also just only increasing if only prices increase. And about this we will talk in a minute. So this is our general system of aims which we have in our economy. And behind this, yeah, we see also the general indicators. Of course, here, economic growth measured with gross domestic product, price level stability. Then we will talk about inflation, high level employment. This means we will have a look at the unemployment rate. And yeah, a little bit more difficult is this aim of an external balance. We will go into this in more detail later on because this is quite specific for the economic policy in Germany, because in Germany we have also the specific situation that we find this system also within a law. This you don't find in other countries. And yeah, this I will give you on the next slide. In the 1960s, we established the so-called Law for Stability and Growth. And of course, this is written down in German, but I translated it for you, and there we find exactly these four different aims. So the federal and state government must take into account the requirements of macroeconomic balance in their economic and fiscal policy. The policy has to be within the framework of market economy. This is also important that we assume a framework of a market economy. They simultaneously contribute to price stability, high level employment, of course, external economic balance, and a steady and appropriate economic growth. And about these four aims we want to talk in the next lectures, starting with appropriate and economic growth. And for this, yeah, we have to keep in mind in the definition of GDP. We see all goods and services within a period, within a country, for final consumptions valued with market prices. So when we then want to calculate this GDP, this would then just mean we see what we have produced, multiplying every amount of production with its price level. So in general, GDP is formally given as P1 x1 plus P2 x2, and summing up all products or summing every production valued with its price level in every sector. So this would be then the amount of production in every sector, and these are the price levels in every sector. Well, and then if, oh, this is the German here, then let's copy this. and rename it. Then if we talk about economic growth, then we see if we calculate it is just by summing up every amount of production multiplied by its prices. And we think of a situation where the amounts produced in every sector do not change, but let's assume just every price is doubling over 1 year, then this would just mean that also GDP is doubled, that we would have an economic growth of 100%. And then we can ask ourselves, are we then happier than before? If we have just only changed the prices, and in this case, the answer is of course no. So somehow we have to get rid of these prices or the development of the prices within the economic performance. And therefore, we want to go to the so-called real numbers. And maybe you have talked about nominal and real numbers already in your investment lecture. You maybe have participated when you have talked about real and nominal interest rates, for example. And yeah, this would mean this nominal GDP, this can change via two possibilities. One possibility is that just our amount of production is changing. And if we really produce more goods and services, then in general we would talk about this situation as that we have grown. But this number, P times X, can also just increase if only prices would increase. And in order to talk about economic growth, then we try to get rid of these price changes. And then we end up just with the real GDP. And this is what we want to focus on when we want to talk about steady and appropriate economic growth in general. Because just higher prices would not mean that our economic performance is better. And we will see later on numbers for Germany. So the nominal GDP, especially in the years 2022 and 2023, you remember it. This was the time of especially the energy crisis, where prices really increased. That now you have to pay €1 more for a beer or something like this. Yeah. If we look at this number, we had really a large increase of nominal GDP in these years, but unfortunately, the real growth was really pure. And yeah, in a minute, we will then talk about how we get rid of this price development. But before that, let's talk in general now since we have established our aggregate, we want to focus when we are talking about economic growth. What would be then the quantitative aim of this number? So, first of all, when we are talking about the situation that an economy has really grown, then keep in mind, in general, we will talk about real numbers, real GDP. But, for example, if you look at the expenditure approach, there the main aggregate within the expenditure approach was consumption. This would also mean GDP could also just increase when we have just a high migration quota. So if many people move into a country, they are all consumed, then we have an additional consumption level. And this, of course, would also just increase the GDP. Would we then, on a welfare level, also talk about only because we are now more people that the economic performance is good? This, in general, we would also doubt. And therefore, we can also get rid of this effect that also only the population has grown if we at first, before we calculate the growth rate, just divide our real GDP by the number of people. And this is then the number of real GDP per capita. And here for Germany, and in comparison to the United States and France, you see that we had a long period, almost 20 years, where our population was almost constant. So there we had roughly 80 million, and then of course there was almost no difference in our country between per capita growth and real GDP growth. But this situation especially changed then after the global financial crisis, and also because of the singular crises which we have since then. Here on the right side, here you see that we started roughly in 2010, in 2011, with a more or less steady growth, and per year growth rates I showed you here. There, in general, you see these two peaks, and these two peaks are due to the refugees coming from Syria and coming from the Ukraine to Germany. This was 2 times more than 1 million people coming into our country within a year. And then having a look at the economic growth means that, yeah, maybe 0.5 or 1 percentage points of overall growth were only dependent on the situation that we have this high migration quota within these years. And this is also always important that you have a look at this. And if you compare the numbers of Germany with the United States and France, then you see that in general you have an inflow of people into France and to the United States, and then comparing just not per capita numbers, but only the growth calculated from real GDP, looking especially at this period here, then this meant that, for example, the growth rate in the United States have to be higher, just because they are in general a country where the people are moving to. Okay, but now let's tackle the technical question, how we get rid of this price effect. There would be a quite easy way to do it, and the easiest way to do it is just to set 1 year as the basis for the price level, and then just hold prices constant and calculating all goods and services just with this constant price level. Well, this is very easy and we can understand this in an easy way. But then if you ask yourself, is this a practical, reasonable way to do it? Then you can just ask yourself, let's assume we take the price level of the year 2000 as the fixed price level and calculating all goods and services in the future with these price levels. What kind of problem can then arise or arises? If you try to multiply the production X today with prices of the year 2000. Today with these old prices. Because if we just held the price level in general constant, then we are done. There is no price change anymore. But is this in general possible for every product, for all products? Idea? Yeah. Pardon? What do you mean by how it changed? Well, we want to get rid of these price changes. The aim is just to hold it constant. So theoretically, this is possible, but is it possible in practice that you multiply every product today with its price in the year 2000? And why not? Yeah, yeah. You? Yeah, but anyway, if we can value it with the prices, well, but then look at this product here. Is it possible to use a price of the year 2000 for this product? No, because especially in our times nowadays, we have many, many new products. Well, in history, then we did it that we just shifted the price level, which we held constant every 5 years into the future. But also, if you look at this product, the change of the product itself, the quality of this product, or what you can do, especially with these digital products, this changes very, very fast. So, a mobile phone today is quite a different product compared to a mobile phone in 5 years ago. And for this reason, roughly 20 years ago, we changed the way how to get rid of this price change effect, that we introduced a concept where we value every produced amount today. So today is t plus 1 with prices of the former year. So to speak, prices of yesterday. And then we divide this number with just nominal GDP of the former year. You see here both times the same price, the same time index t, and t was the index of yesterday. So this is nominal GDP of yesterday, and this is real GDP of today. And then we calculate this with an index of the real GDP, also of in time of yesterday. So, well, then you can ask, and we obtain the index of today. So this would be again today, and this would be yesterday. Well, then you can ask, well, how shall I calculate this if the number of today depends on the number of yesterday? At some time I have to start. But actually, this is not that problem because now, or in general, we are not interested really in the number of real GDP or the index, but we are interested in the growth rates. And the growth rate, of course, is not dependent on the starting point. So this means then we can choose just some base year, and this base year we set to 100. So in general, if we operating with indices, we just set them in the neighborhood of 100, and then we have this as a starting point. Giving this starting point, we can then calculate all real indices into the future and of course also into the past. And this is then the overall definition of real GDP index. Sometimes in textbooks this concept how to get rid of the price effect is only explained via this fixed price basis, which we have talked about in the beginning. Well, this is maybe a little bit easier to understand, but I think I have to show you this a little bit more complicated, so-called chained definition, because here that this number is depending on its number in history. This means we have here a so-called chain index, and the reason why I show you this is how it is done today, that you can really understand this number. This looks right now maybe a bit complicated or quite theoretical. We will do it just in a minute using a simple example that you know how to calculate this. Or when we take again prices and quantities, this means here quantities of today valued with its price 1 year or 1 period ago. This is just the definition. And how do we get then the growth rates? Well, this is always the same, and sometimes students have some difficulties to calculate growth rates. Well, you will see within this lecture that we do it quite often, because in the end also inflation is nothing else than calculating a growth rate. And in general in economics you focus very often on growth rates. So the development of the revenue within your company, you talk about on average, the last 5 years, the revenue of my company has increased by 3% or something like this. And for this, you should really have understood what is a growth rate. And this just means you take the absolute change of your number. So this is the value today minus the value yesterday and divide it by the starting point. So by the value of yesterday. So this is then what we want to have, where we want to see is our economy or has our economy a good performance or not? What is the real economic growth? Well, when we say nominally, we had an increase, as I mentioned, in 2022, I think it was 7%. Then we are also interested how much of this 7% is just only due to the price effect. And for this, we calculate the price level of the whole economy, and this is called not BIP, yes, again Germany, GDP, GDP, and here we also need GDP. GDP deflator, and this we can interpret as price level of the whole economy. Later on, we will see that this price level differs from the price level which we use when we are talking about inflation. About these differences, we will talk then later in this lecture. And this price level is just also defined via the relative number of the index of nominal GDP. Here, please have a look. Always the same time index divided by the index of real GDP. And now it's just formally multiplied by 100 because again, we want to have this index, this price level index in the neighborhood of 100. Okay, that's it. And now we go to a little example. And here we want just to calculate nominal growth, real growth, and then also the development of our prices in a very simple example that we just have a look at an economy of and a two sector or two goods economy. This is the development of the prices, and this is the development of the quantities. Okay, this is a second slide here because yeah, I also recommend that you really start to use all the software packages you have in order to do your calculations. Of course, you can always do it by hand, but this will take very much time. And therefore, you can just double click within this table, and then in your PowerPoint slide, we have the plugin of Excel, and I really also recommend, maybe you have done this already in other lectures, that you really get used to the use of the general office packages you have. Because this software is more or less everywhere available. Of course, you have more sophisticated programs doing these data manipulation or doing statistics, but maybe at your working place later on, you don't have these software packages. And therefore, I really recommend that you start to do your calculation manipulating data with Excel. Okay, done. Let's try it. The first one is that you should calculate nominal GDP of the year 2016. What do I have to do? You just have to use the definition. Yes? Yep. Yeah, great. So we just calculate 0.9 times 100 plus 2 times 200. And this I can do here equals 0.9, not plus, but times 100 plus 2 times 200, and we end up with 490. How do I get nominal GDP of 2017? Yeah, just the same. And now, since I have already here on the right, on the left, you see this is the formula. This formula I can just copy down and everything is done. So let's copy this, move this downward, and we have every nominal GDP. Now we want to have the index. We start with our base year, the first one, 2016. So now we know that 490 is set as an index number to 100. Nominal GDP is developing from 490 to 520. So the question is, what is the index number associated with 520? What do I have to calculate? Yes, great. So your colleague said just the starting point, 100 times 520 divided by 490. So this 100 times 520 divided by 490. And we get 106.12. The next index of 2018. Yep, yep. Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, great. And we again see, I click in this here, this would be just to move this formula one line downward. So again, I can just copy it and I get the other two numbers. Oop, this was. So, and then of course we are interested in the growth rates. Maybe the first one, funny question. What would be the growth rate, nominal growth rate in 2016? Would this be the growth rate in 2016? No, this would be in 17. Yeah. And I said it's a funny question to ask you for the growth rate in 2016, because applying the definition would mean that I have the number of 2015, but this is not within my data, so I just cannot calculate this number. Up. Oh, this was the wrong cell here. So, but you were totally right. In year 2016, it would be 106.12 minus 100 divided by the starting point divided by 100. And of course, this we can do in our head. It would be 6.12%. So this minus 100 divided by 100. And let's change the format. Percent. Here we are. What would be the growth rate in 2018? Yes, we can just copy it because it would be 124 minus 106 divided by 106.2. So now comes the interesting part, real GDP. And for this, let's recapitulate the definition just 10 minutes ago. Definition was, we take the quantities in the period times the prices of the former period. So then again, the funny question, what would be real GDP in 2016? It's again not possible because we would need the prices of the year 2015. So this is not possible. And what do I have done to do in 2017? Yes, and it is this 100 times 0.9 plus, yes, by 520. Yep. So let's do this. So 0.9 times 100 plus 2 times 210. So if you click into this formula here, you see also highlighted what you have done. So 0.9 times 100, 2 times 210. And also this is done in the same way for every year. So again, we can just shift down the formula. So, and now maybe comes the most complicated part, but actually it is just applying the definition which we have. So let's go back. The index of real GDP, now we have all the numbers together, is, oops, here we are, the index of the former year times real GDP of the period we are looking at, divided, and this is important, by the nominal GDP of the former year. So then we have index of the former year is this 100 times real GDP 510, the period we are looking at, dividing it by nominal GDP 490 of the former period. Well, and this, of course, is also the same for every year. So also this we can copy down until 2019. Real growth rate of 2016. Well, we would need the number of 2015. It's not possible. And here now you can really just apply when you in general have learned what is a growth rate. This is always the same. This you have to learn only once. So the value today minus the value yesterday divided by the value yesterday. And since we have already done this here for the nominal GDP, then of course the calculation is just the same. So we can copy these formulas and put it just to the right of our real numbers. And the last one, GDP deflator. Again, this is just an application of our definition. So the index of nominal GDP divided by the index of real GDP and formally multiplied by 100. So although this is a really simple calculation, I write it explicitly down here. Index 100 of nominal GDP divided by the index of real GDP times formally 100, and of course then we end up with 100. But then again, applying this definition in every year, we get the other numbers by copying this. And then we want to know, well, here we have a nominal growth rate of 66.12%. How much of this is due to the price effect? This would be the development of our price index. Again, just calculating the rate of change of our price index means we can copy these formulas and put it here on the right. But actually, that you can also recapitulate this, I will just write down, not every cell, but some cells, I write it down that you, when you have later on a look, how did you get these numbers? So let's start with this one. This would be again 0.9. I will upload it. Plus 2 times 200 is our 490. Then let's take this growth rate here. What have we done in order, not the growth rate, the index, what have we done to get this index 124? This one here. By 220. No, this is, I see, not right. Sorry. Yes, this is 610 divided by 520 multiplied by 106. Great. So 610 divided by 520 times 106.12 is 124.49. And let's use this one. What have we done in order to obtain this growth rate? Yep. This is the growth rate now here. I want to have. How did we get it? This is also possible. We could use the index or we could use the, it is both is possible. So, well, let's write down both possibilities. This is maybe also a good example to do this. So, and since go into the index means just to make a relative change of every number in the same way, this has to be the same number as for 142.24 minus 124.49 over 124.49, and this is then 14.26%. Okay, then now this real GDP number, number 4. Yeah, this one times, yes, 120 plus 2, great, and 222. So 1 times 120 plus 2 times 222 is 560. Let's take this index here. This was now maybe the most complicated, this chained definition. So the index of the period 2017 is equal to the index of the former year, this 100, times real GDP of the year itself, 510, divided by the nominal GDP of the former year, 490. 08. Yeah, which growth rate? Let's take this one, 6. Again, value today minus the former year divided by the value of the former year. 119.99 minus 112.09 divided 112.09 is 705%. And the last one, that's this one. Just the definition is nominal GDP index over real GDP index and then formally multiplied by 100. So this would be then the 100 formal multiplication times 124.49 over 112.09, and this is 111.06. And let's also calculate here one last growth rate, and then let's choose this one. Again, 111 minus 101 divided by 101. 111.06 minus 101, 96 over 101.96 is 8.93%. Well, why do I do this in this way? Well, I really want that you start to use numbers and get used to do this, because economics is quite a lot of economics is just looking at numbers, calculating different numbers, calculating aggregates, and only saying, well, I have understood the concept does not mean that later on at your working place you are really able to do it. I have to admit that I didn't learn it in that way in my studies, and then I really learned it in night shifts when I started to work. Because it was just said, well, have a deeper look. When I was in the scientific staff of the Council of German Economic Advisors during the financial crisis, they just said, well, here are all the balance sheets of our public banks. You see, they have a problem in general in the financial crisis. We want to know where are the problems. So please go deep into the data, look about into the development of the different numbers within these balance sheets. Well, this I have done for roughly 1 year, and I haven't learned it in my studies. I said, well, it's great. I have understand the concept. I don't know. I know how a balance sheet looks like, and that's it. And yeah, in the exams, in many years, I really posed always similar questions like this or calculating these numbers. And then, for example, sometimes I'm a little bit surprised because when you get used to manipulating data, then you get also, so to speak, a feeling when you have the raw data. Just look at these numbers here, and just by looking at it, when you know, well, later on, I shall calculate the different growth rates. And then you see just by looking at these data, well, every data point is maybe constant here from 100 to 100, or it is increasing. So over time, all numbers are increasing. And this in the end then means definitely for every growth number has to be positive. And in the answers, then sometimes I got that the index is falling or negative growth numbers or something like this. Well, it always can happen that you miscalculate something. I do also mistakes. But if you have the general development in your head, because you have done it not only one time, but 5 or 10 times, then you already know, well, the output has to look like something. And this, I think, with artificial intelligence will be more and more and more important. Well, this is just the Office program to simplify your calculations. Think about if you would have done this all by hand. This would mean we maybe end up at 12 o'clock or 13 o'clock. And when you use artificial intelligence, well, if you feed in just this table into ChatGPT, you can nowadays just upload Excel files, PDF files, and pressing enter, and then you directly get the whole answer within a second. But then you have to look at it and say, well, is it reasonable? Has it fetched in the right way the data? And if you then see, well, there is a negative growth rate, then you know, well, there is something wrong in the calculation. So please practice these things. And one last aspect for today I want to talk about is, well, we have here a quite short time series, only 4 years. But in general, also think about a company you are interested into the development of profits over the last 10 years. And then you want to calculate the profit development, the average growth rate of your profits of the last 10 years. So let's use here the nominal growth rate. What is the average growth rate of nominal GDP from 2016 to 2019? What do I have to do when I want to average growth rates? I think then you have to think about your math course, or you have done it in school. I don't know. Because what is not allowed to do it exactly? Well, it is not allowed just to take these three numbers, adding up and dividing by 3. Because what instead I have to do? Because it's a growth process. I think you have done in your math course many things about financial mathematics, so talking about interest rates, yeah, or net present values. This is the same. So when you calculate net present values, you divide by 1 over r squared, and 1 plus r to the power of 3, and so on. And in the end, an interest rate is nothing else than a growth rate, because it's just the growth rate of capital. And when you have averaged interest rates, I don't think that you have used just adding up the arithmetic mean. Well, then let's do it in a general way. What is the question behind it when we want to calculate an average growth rate? Well, we are starting here with 100, and after 3 years, we end up with 119, 142.24. And how did we get there? Well, just in the first year with a growth rate of 6.12. This means multiplying with the growth factor 1 plus 6. Yeah, so 1 plus 6.12%. Then we are at an index level of 106.2, and to the next year we are growing with 17.31%. So now taking this number 106.12 again times 1 plus 17.31%, and the last one 1 plus, yes, you're right, 14 2.0. This you can't read. 14.26%. So this would be then the growth rate of the first year, G1, I call it. This would be the growth rate of the second year, G2, and this would be the growth rate of the third year. And now we say in our head, we want to know the growth rate which is not changing over time, which is in every year the same, also starting from 100, ending up at 142. So this should be equal to 100 times 1 plus, and this I call G bar. So G bar should be the average growth rate in the first year. In the second year, it should be the same. So times 1 plus G bar and times the same number also in the third year. 1 plus G bar, this should be also 142. Well, and then see, very surprisingly, this concept of averaging is of course not dependent on the starting and the end point. This is this holds in general. So we end up then with 1 plus G1 times 1 plus G2 times 1 plus G3 equals, and multiplying the 3 times the same number just means 1 plus G bar to the power of 3. We are interested in this number, average growth rate. So then you have to take the third root of this left side and subtracting 1. So then we get G bar is the third root of 1 plus G1 plus 1 plus G2 plus 1 plus G3 minus 1. Well, and 1 plus G, this we call then the growth factor. And this is nothing else than not the arithmetic, but the geometric mean of the growth factors. And hopefully you have talked about geometric mean in your math course. I think so. Geometric mean of growth factors. Yeah. Let's calculate this. We go into our Excel file. Let's use it here. Average growth rate. This would be then 1 plus first growth rate plus 1 plus second growth rate times 1 plus third growth rate, the third root, and I need a bracket just here, and oops, this one, and -1, thank you. And this is then percentage 12.46. And let's just do it with the arithmetic mean of these two growth rates. Then you see already in the first digit we have a difference. Well, because it's of course another calculation, and you should keep in mind, in general, if you have only small numbers, only small growth rates, actually less than 10%, then you can approximately just use the arithmetic mean. But if you have larger ones, then be careful that you use this geometric mean, because your error could be quite large. Okay, and yeah, maybe let's just compare these two different kinds of averages. The arithmetic mean, this was defined as x1 plus x2 plus xn, summing just up all numbers divided by n, so times 1 over n. And if you look at the geometric mean, then we have just x1 times x2 times xn, oops, n. And now we have to take the nth root, and this means to the power of 1 over n. And here maybe you see the correspondence between these two means. We just interchanging a plus by a multiplication, and we just move up this 1 times 1 over n to exponent of 1 over n. And be careful, if you are averaging growth rates, and this is quite often done, then to be mathematically exact, you have to take the average of the growth factors, the geometric mean of the growth factors, in order to average your growth rates. Okay, that's it for today. And Next week, we will then talk about the development of economic growth, and then we will go on with inflation and so on. So, thank you very much for today.